Hi, Chris Mather back with you with Module 4 of the It's About the Story series. And what we're going to talk about in this module is venture pitches and what order works. Now, we talked in the last module about the fact that I'm not particularly a fan of templates because I just think they take away from your story. If it works, but sometimes it doesn't. But you still have to think about the order that you need to use. And that's what we're going to spend some time on in this module. So let's get to it. The first thing I think you should think about using is a concept called slide mapping. You've probably seen this where you have the tray view in PowerPoint or other slide creation program that you use. I don't know if you use this as a planning tool, but it can be a great way to plan out where you're going and what you're trying to do uh, with your presentation because you get to see kind of a bird's eye view and see how it works. So in this case, we start off with the detail of the problem and the markets that have the problem, go into a summary. We've got a system diagram. And at least in this case, we can see 12 slides in kind of what we're trying to do. This can be really, really helpful in a lot of ways. I'll tell you a true story that happened with a great entrepreneur. Now, this is a guy who had started and run a successful non-venture type company, but it was doing a venture type idea. And he had a bachelor's from Princeton, so he's no dummy. But literally, we were in a conference room, and he just said, "I'm not getting this. This is not working for me. I can't figure it out." And I was a little bit flummoxed because of the fact that this is a really smart guy. And I said, "Randy, this isn't hard." And I started drawing little rectangles on the board. So we talk about a slide like this, right? Yep. We talked about a slide like this. Markets that have the problem. Now we're going to go over this, and we went into the detail, and all of a sudden the lights came on. He said, "Oh, I see how it works." And he was extremely successful from then. Was funded with that in that round and got some other funding as well. Now you might wonder, does the order matter? And yes, the order does matter, but in the end, it's the story that really matters. You want this to be put together in a way that's compelling and interesting to a venture capital or a venture capital like audience. One of the ways you want to do that is tell the story in an interesting way. It's the same reason why certain TV series make it and they get binge watched and other ones don't, because they're told in an interesting way. One of the things you can do is just tell the story in a way that has worked in the past. And if you followed some of the recommendations from the uh, the last module where we talked about talking to friendlies, that's exactly what you could do. Is you can find out what order, what kind of way does it take to build that knowledge amongst that audience member, and then do that again, or at least consider doing that again for your VC type audience. So now we start to figure out how we put the pieces together. And there's a lot of pieces that you have to work with because you have the problem that you're solving, and of course, the solution that goes with it. And you probably want to tell them about your technology magic in the market, but the IP review kind of goes with the technology magic. Your team and your customers are all important, obviously. Business model is a big deal, as we've discussed. The summary financials, and then the funds use in the ask. And this may not be an all-inclusive list. You may have other things that you have to talk about as well. So it is a challenge to get all these pieces together. So let's talk about some different ways of how you might put it together in terms of an order. So that is it for module 4. Hopefully it works. Now we're going to build on that from the order and go back to some of those core topics that we talked about in an earlier module, the product, the market, the team, and the business model, and how you work them into uh, a well-crafted story and the things that you use for graphics and things like that. And then just a little look ahead, we will go into some other topics like intellectual property and things like that for the module after that. As we look at ways to structure your presentation, I'm going to start with what you lead with, because that really kind of defines in some way how the presentation is going to go after that. Not completely defines it, but at least defines the start. So why don't we start there, and we'll start with the most common option, which is leading with the problem. And this is often the most effective. It is kind of the, how many times has this happened to you from late night TV, if any of you guys remember that, where you're starting off with what you're trying to solve before they know what your solution is. It just says, hey, you've got a problem and I can help you solve it. If VCs recommended an order, this would always win. The VCs kind of like this is what they're used to. It isn't always the best versus some other options, but it is a good one. Typically right after that obviously would be the solution. And then you'd follow with, how did you do that? What is different? What did you do that's magic? And if your magic is patentable, you need to describe the patent in there. So you're really getting into what the solution's about. If it's software and it's for example, a cloud application, or if it's a mobile application, you talk a little bit more about how easy it is to use and things like that. Then you might want to go into your IP review. Once again, not for software, but for most other technologies, you want to go over that. And then describe the business model, because that really naturally flows. You've got a problem, a solution, technology, and then here's how we get it to market and get it to customers. After that, you want to describe how big that market is. Now, you could possibly do the market earlier than this, but in this case, this seems to be a good fit. You also want to talk about your team. So notice, even though the team's one of the top things, it's pretty far along, because they don't really care about the team in the end unless they know about all the other things. Then they want to hear how great your team is. And then you give them some summary financials, which we'll get into in the next couple of modules. And then you ask them for the money. Now, another way that you can do it is to lead with the technology. Now, this one's a little bit different, and I will tell you that it works well in some cases. When the technology is game-changing for lots of markets and it's really going to wow them, it's a good way to do it. If you have to really understand the technology to understand the problem, which happens, that's also a good way to do it. But it does carry some risk. A lot of VCs don't like people focused completely on the technology. If you're the founder of the company and the founder of the technology, I would run this by some other people before you do it, because generally VCs are often distrustful of entrepreneurs who are the technology people, and they're impressed with their own technology. But in this case, if you do it, you want to get to the problem, solution, and customers right after that, as soon as you can, so that mitigates any of that risk that you have. Because I've seen many times that the technology is the way to go, the way to start with. And then, of course, you hit the solution. Then you talk about the customer. So even though you describe the technology up front, you really get to some of the more applications-focused and customer-focused issues. Then you describe the market in this case. Business model, pretty much the same as before, but this case I put the business model ahead of the team. IP review, summary financials, and then you go to the funds used in an ask. Another one to consider is to lead with the team. Now, this one is a little bit unusual, and it can work in a couple of cases. It doesn't work in all cases, and I've had people say, well, I'm just going to lead with the team because that's what I've heard that VCs like the most. Do not do that, because VCs don't care about your background until they know that it matters. Now, it does matter if you have been a notable serial entrepreneur or an industry figure, and your background gives you what's called imprimatur to start. Or if I'll give you a good example. Is I saw the founder of Twitter, the original founder, make a presentation. He was already running his next opportunity, which I think was Square. And he obviously would want to start with what he had done before, and he did that. And it wasn't a venture pitch; it was just a lecture. But if you're notable and you've started a bunch of companies, you do this. Second thing, if you have an incredible story about how the technology or the company came about, then it can work to do that. You may not go into all the details in team. You might even have 2 team sections if you do that. But in those cases, it can work. And after that, I won't take as much time to do this. So it's the technology magic. In this case, we thought we might do, then the problem, the solution, the customers. And any of these can be kind of switched around. In the end, there's a lot of other approaches that you can do, because it's about the story, and even the order of what I showed you. You put those pieces together and you craft it into a story that holds together. So the order can be different. There's lots of ways, because it really depends on your story. but a lot of other approaches you can take. In some cases, you can lead with a related anecdote. So if there's something about the technology, I mentioned the one about the technology coming about in a kind of an unusual way, or if there's an interesting story with how the company came together, you can lead with the size of the market. In some cases, to say, look what an opportunity this is, and then delve into the details. It can work, and whatever's really worked, I've found with in casual situations when you're talking to somebody where you don't have slides, is generally a good way to do it. So you've got a lot of flexibility for sure in doing that. There are some things that you should never, and when I say never, I mean never, ever lead with. So just really don't do that. So, for example, one is you don't ever want to do an unrelated joke or anecdote. This is when people try to kind of warm up the crowd, kind of a thing with a joke. The risk of it falling flat and the odds of it falling flat are way too high. And so what happens is that if it doesn't go well, it's everybody feels bad and everybody's uncomfortable, and that's a bad thing. And even if it does go well, there are those people who are going to say, and rightfully so, like, why is he or she doing that? So that's one you'd really want to avoid at all cases. You don't want to do a table of contents and an agenda. They know what you're supposed to talk about. They know what you're supposed to convince them of. You don't have to give them the table of contents. It isn't a mystery. And it's kind of that story of which I think the next one goes with as well, which is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them, which is an old speaking thing from Dale Carnegie or something else. And I took Dale Carnegie. It was great, but this is not what you should do. You don't need this kind of stuff because you got to think about this being as a TV show. So, and think about an NCIS type TV show, some of the most successful in the last 10 or 15 years. They don't go in there and say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to tell you, we're going to show you a dead body, and then we're going to go into a lot of the detail of how that dead body could have come about and what might have happened. And then, no, you're not going to do that. Those things start off with, oh my God, this guy is dead. What happened? Boom, 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 boom. Things are happening. That's what you need to have. And so you don't need any of this kind of stuff. It's just all fluff. And then the biggest fluff of all is the history of the company and the LLC details. Just not interesting, not important. If you have $500 in a day, you can get an LLC. It's not hard. So nobody wants to hear that. As soon as a VC sees that, or a VC type audience, so like an entrepreneurial development organization, they kind of cringe, and you're already starting off from vines. You don't want to be doing that at all. So that's it for Module 4. Hopefully it was helpful for you and it's starting to come together. In the next module, Module 5, we'll go back to those core topics that we introduced in the Module 2 of product, market, team, and business model, and give you some tips on how you might incorporate those into a well-crafted story. And then a little further look ahead in Module 6, we'll go into some of the other topics that we mentioned actually in this module, like intellectual property, summary business financials, the ask, things like that, and how you might use those in your presentation as well. And I would invite you to think about a perfect pitch implementation if you want one-to-one help at a very reasonable price, and something that I guarantee will be, well, I don't know if it's going to be life-changing, but it certainly will be game-changing for how you put together your presentation, whether it's for a VC audience or a venture development organization that has 50,000, because that 50,000 may lead to millions after that, or any other environment, pitch competition, things like that. It's one-to-one coaching that's unmatched, and I think you'll find it to be very, very helpful. So go to the website and check it out. And with that, we just want to thank you for watching. If you like what you're seeing with It's About the Story, please feel free to subscribe to the Leveraging channel and give us a thumbs up. Thanks again for watching.